Okay, let's dive right into this incredibly fascinating explainer. We're looking at a man who fell asleep in the 1920s and claimed to wake up 2 millennia in the future. Now, I know, it sounds like pure science fiction, right? But the crazy thing is, what we're about to explore is entirely based on a genuine, deeply guarded personal diary that was literally never intended for publication. We're going to trace the unbelievable narrative of Paul Amadeus Dienach, detailing his life in the early 20th century, his astonishing awakening in the year 3906 AD, and the sweeping history of humanity's future that he brought back with him.
So, to really understand this, we have to begin with the man himself, Paul Amadeus Dienach. He was a Swiss-Austrian language teacher, and unfortunately, he was plagued by fragile health and this intense, overwhelming sense of isolation. His own words really set an eerie, almost mysterious tone for the unbelievable events that followed. Dienach was a quiet, modest, and incredibly cautious guy, living a pretty unremarkable life. He actually survived a brief bout of an unusual lethargic illness back in 1917, but his days were completely overshadowed by a heavy, incurable sadness and a deep feeling of just being completely alone in the world. It's a massive contrast to the grandiose, universe-spanning future he was about to witness.
This right here is the cover of a deeply personal diary that, honestly, was never meant for our eyes. He kept it totally secret out of a paralyzing fear of ridicule. I mean, who wouldn't? Shortly before he died of tuberculosis in the 1920s, Dienach handed these manuscripts over to his favorite student, George Papachatzis. He played it off, saying it was just material to help him practice his German translation. At first, Papachatzis thought his teacher had just written a weird sci-fi novel to cope with his depression. But over 14 years of translating it, it hit him. He realized he was translating a literal, day-by-day diary of a man who firmly, genuinely believed he had lived in the future.
Section 1. The 1921 Conscious Slide, a journey through time. Let's start our chronological journey with the bizarre medical anomaly that triggered this whole thing.
You see, when Dienach arrived in their time, the highly advanced physicians of the future didn't treat him like a madman. Not at all. Instead, they defined his mind-bending condition as a conscious slide. They completely understood that his 20th century consciousness had somehow leaped across time to inhabit a host body in their era, all while his original body remained completely comatose in the past.
So how did this even start? Well, suffering from a severe neurological disease called encephalitis lethargica, which is an illness that causes a massive immune response to overloaded neurons, Dienach fell into a deep sleep in a Zurich hospital in 1921. But guys, this wasn't just a normal sleep. He didn't wake up the next day or even the next week. He remained completely, terrifyingly unresponsive in this lethargic coma for a full, uninterrupted year.
Section 2. Awakening in 3906 AD. The body of Andreas Northam. So, while his physical body lay completely unresponsive in that Swiss hospital bed, his mind actually woke up thousands of years later. He woke up in the year 3906 AD, but inside the body of a 28-year-old man named Andreas Northam. The diary he kept to document this massive leap is absolutely wild. I mean, just imagine it for a second. Open your eyes expecting to see a dingy 1920s hospital ward, and instead you find yourself in a staggeringly advanced world, totally surrounded by people speaking this bizarre blend of English and Scandinavian. Here is the crucial point. Northam had actually died for 15 minutes. He'd suffered fatal head injuries in an accident, but futuristic medical science, specifically a team led by a guy named Professor Molson, rapidly froze and then revived his body. The catch? It wasn't Andreas Northam who woke up. It was Dienach's mind running the hardware. Those future doctors realized this incredibly rare conscious slide had just happened, so they decided to gently educate him about the absolutely wild world he had just been born into. Section 3. The history of tomorrow, from the 20th to the 40th century. Thrust into this bewildering new reality, Dienach basically had to relearn the entire history of humanity.
The scholars of 3906 condensed centuries of chaos, technical triumphs, and spiritual evolution into a massive macro history of tomorrow. Now, importantly, they deliberately withheld the immediate history of the 20th and 21st centuries from him. They were terrified that if he ever returned to his own time, knowing his immediate future might somehow alter the course of history. But from the 23rd century onward, they held absolutely nothing back. We learn that humanity did eventually reach the stars, but a devastating failure on Mars taught them a brutal lesson about the overwhelming, indiscriminate power of natural forces. Starting in 2024 AD, humans frantically colonized Mars.
And the crazy thing is, the colonies actually thrived for 6 decades. But then, an abrupt and incredibly harsh climatic shift destroyed everything. Over 20 million settlers perished in just a matter of months. It was a tragedy that ended humanity's grand dream of interplanetary expansion and forced them to look back at Earth. After that, following centuries of brutal global conflicts, massive demographic shifts, and nuclear warfare that nearly destroyed civilization entirely, humanity finally united. In 2396 AD, they established something called the Rettstat, which effectively ended war forever. And what's absolutely fascinating is exactly how they did it. They entirely removed politicians from power. Global leadership was handed straight over to the great scientists and technicians of the era. It really makes you wonder what our world would look like today if we adopted that exact same blueprint, right? Ushering in a highly organized, technocratic age of absolute law, order, and abundance.
Section 4. The Great Reality Revealed, the Spiritual Shift of Humanity. So a perfect, peaceful society with infinite food and no wars sounds great, right? Well, it wasn't enough to satisfy the human soul. That technocratic utopia eventually felt hollow, creating a stark contrast between two distinct ages. The older era, known as the Eld Era, was colder, materialistic, and completely obsessed with physical science. But the new era, the Nojere, represented a breathtaking age of enlightenment. People started to realize that just surviving and being comfortable didn't cure their deep metaphysical pain, that agonizing human thirst for a higher meaning. They needed something way more than just perfect machines.
The spiritual center of this entire new world was Samith. And listen, this wasn't some religion created by humans out of a fear of death. It was recognized as a profound, objective reality that exists totally independently of us. This future society realized that the physical universe is really just a tiny, oversimplified slice of this staggering, unimaginably beautiful great reality. Samith is what finally quenched humanity's deep metaphysical pain and thirst for true cosmic meaning.
But this wasn't just a new philosophy. It was actually triggered by a physical, biological evolution in the year 3382 AD, an event known as the Nibelvirch. Through centuries of intense inner cultivation at places like the Anderson Institute, the human brain literally evolved. It unlocked a brand new cognitive sensor called oversen. For the very first time, humans didn't just have to believe in a higher power, they could directly perceive the great reality. This led to a state of profound spiritual ecstasy they called Reissvirch. They were literally experiencing the universe directly from within themselves. Now, as detailed in the Anderson Institute's records, this sudden enlightenment was so intense that it initially caused a completely unexpected crisis. It actually triggered mass suicides. When people directly experienced the overwhelming beauty of Samith, this immense escape impulse washed over them. Earthly life suddenly felt incredibly insignificant, and thousands wanted to simply leave their physical bodies behind. The spiritual leaders had to step in aggressively, convincing the population that their earthly lives were a necessary, purposeful step in the grand design, ultimately pulling society back from the brink.
Section 5. Return to the past, the final sleep. Eventually, the spiritual leadership stabilized society.
For Dienach, this incredibly peaceful, enlightened era was deeply colored by a very personal romance. He experienced a profound affection with a woman named Sylvia. But honestly, it was a tragic, bittersweet romance. The emotional weight of his displacement in time was constantly looming over them. Dienach carried this heavy secret that he was essentially an imposter, deeply aware that his idyllic life in 3906 AD was lived entirely on borrowed time inside another man's physical body.
The climax of all this happened on a beautiful hill overlooking the futuristic landscape. Sylvia handed him a simple wreath of windflowers and piously recited ancient Italian verses. It translates to, "I spent my life here crying from nostalgia for something." Looking at those delicate windflowers, the age-old human sorrow, a sorrow he still intimately understood as a man of the 20th century, just washed right over him. It perfectly captured the pain their futuristic era had finally cured through the Nibelvirch. It was a massive emotional peak for his incredible journey.
Overwhelmed by a sudden, intense serenity after a year of complete sleeplessness, triggered by that profound moment on the hill with Sylvia and the windflowers, Northam's body finally drifted off to sleep, and the absolute second he fell asleep in 3906 AD, his consciousness snapped right back to 1922. Just like that, he woke up in his Swiss hospital bed, recovering from his coma, forever changed. He eventually poured every single memory into the pages of the diary we're discussing today. Which leaves us with this final, thrilling question to ponder.
Was this impossibly detailed, sociopolitically complex, and spiritually profound vision just the coping mechanism of a comatose man? Or did Paul Amadeus Dienach truly slip the bonds of time to show us that a beautiful, enlightened future is waiting for us if we can only survive long enough to reach it? Thank you so much for exploring this mind-bending explainer with me today.